Somewhere between Jacksonville and Savannah, your father pulled the car off the highway without a word, and every kid in the back seat already knew where you were headed. That blue roof sticking up above the pine trees meant one thing. You were about to walk into a building where every flat surface was covered in candy. You could not get anywhere else. Number 19 was the first thing your grandmother put in your hand before you even cleared the front door. The treat at number 8 outlasted most of the stores that sold it. And the one sitting at number 1 built the whole company from a roadside stand in Georgia. Those stores were not restaurants and they were not gas stations. They were the place where a long drive turned into something worth remembering. Here are 25 old Stuckey's roadside treats that have faded into history. Number 25. Sour balls. They sat in a glass jar next to the register, bright as Christmas ornaments, and every color meant a different flavor that never quite matched what you expected. The green ones tasted like lime mixed with floor cleaner. The red ones burned your tongue with a cinnamon heat that had no business being in a piece of candy that looked like a marble. You reached into the jar and grabbed a fistful, and your fingers came out sticky, and you did not care because you were 8 years old and standing in a store that sold pecan logs the size of your forearm. Your mother told you to pick 3. You picked 5 and hid 2 in your pocket, where they melted into the lining by the time you crossed the Florida state line. Sour balls were a gas station universal, but Stuckey's kept theirs in jars instead of plastic bins, and that made them feel like something from a general store in 1920. You picked your own. You touched every single one in the jar looking for the purple ones, and nobody stopped you, because that was how candy worked before shrink wrap and hygiene codes turned every treat into a sealed unit. Number 24. Boiled peanuts. A paper cup full of soft, salty, waterlogged peanuts sat on the counter near the door at every Stuckey's south of Virginia. They looked like something that had gone wrong. The shells were soggy, the peanuts inside had the texture of a cooked bean, and the brine ran down your wrist. But if you grew up eating them, nothing else on that counter mattered until the cup was empty. Stuckey's kept a pot going behind the counter in the stores that carried them, and the smell hit you before the air conditioning did. Northerners walked past them every time. Southerners bought 2 cups and asked if there was more in the back. Before I go any further, for the folks who want more of these old recipes gathered in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. It is a cookbook full of recipes like the ones you are about to hear, and you can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not push it again. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Number 23. Orange slice candies. Those soft, sugar-crusted half-moons sat in a bin near the front of every Stuckey's, and they had nothing to do with real oranges. They were pure sugar and gelatin, coated in enough granulated sugar to sand a table. You could feel the grit on your teeth for an hour. Kids grabbed fistfuls of them because they were bright and cheap. Adults grabbed them because they remembered grabbing them as kids. The flavor was somewhere between orange soda and cough syrup, and nobody ever complained about it. They were not a Stuckey's invention. Every 5 and dime in the country carried them. But something about buying them at a roadside store on a long drive made them taste different. You were not shopping. You were on an adventure, and these were the rations. Number 22. Honey bun. Stuckey's sold the big ones. Not the flat plastic-wrapped kind from a vending machine, but the thick spiral pastries glazed with enough sugar to make the wax paper stick. You had to peel it off in strips. The dough was soft and yeasty, and the glaze cracked when you pulled it apart. Your mother ate half of one in the car and pretended she had not. These were road food in the truest sense. Nobody ate a honey bun at home. You ate one because you were 200 miles from anywhere, and the next real meal was 3 hours away. Stuckey's kept them on a rack near the coffee, and by mid-afternoon in July, the glaze had started to run. Number 21. Glass bottle grape soda. The cooler at Stuckey's was a chest-style unit with a sliding top, and the bottle stood upright in ice water. You reached in up to your elbow and pulled one out dripping. Grape was the one kids wanted. Not cola, not root beer. Grape. The glass was so cold it fogged the second it hit the summer air, and the cap came off with a church key mounted on the side of the cooler. That sound, the hiss and the clink of the cap dropping into the metal catchbox, was the sound of a road trip starting over. The soda was sweeter than anything you would drink today, pure cane sugar and artificial grape flavor, and it stained your tongue purple for the rest of the afternoon. Nobody made you drink water instead. Those rules had not been invented yet. The candy counter at a Stuckey's was not organized. It was piled. Glass jars sat next to cardboard boxes, and cellophane bags hung from metal hooks on a pegboard wall behind the register. Nothing had a barcode. The woman behind the counter weighed your bag on a hanging scale and told you the price from memory. There was no nutritional information, no ingredient list, no allergy warning. There was just candy, and you pointed at what you wanted. That counter was the reason you remembered the stop 3 states later. Not the restroom, not the gasoline, not the road map your father folded wrong and stuffed into the glove box. The candy. It was the only part of the drive where someone asked you what you wanted, and your answer mattered. Number 20. Rock candy sticks. A glass jar of them sat on the counter, and they looked like something from a science experiment. Jagged sugar crystals grown on a wooden stick, clear or tinted pink or amber. You held one up to the window and the light came through it like stained glass. They took forever to eat, which was the whole point on a 6-hour drive. You licked one side for 50 miles and it barely changed shape. Kids who bit into them risked a cracked tooth. Kids who were patient made one last until the next state line. The flavor was nothing but sugar, no fruit, no mint, nothing clever, just pure crystallized sweetness on a stick, and somehow that was enough. Number 19. Whorehound drops. If you never tasted one, there is no way to explain it. If you did, you either loved them or you spat it into a napkin at your grandmother's house and never spoke of it again. Whorehound is a plant, a bitter herb that grows wild across the South, and people had been boiling it into candy for over 100 years before Stuckey's put a bag of it on the shelf. The drops were dark brown, almost black, with a flavor that landed somewhere between root beer and cough medicine. They were not sweet the way modern candy is sweet. The sugar was there to make the herb tolerable, not to hide it. Old men bought them by the bag. They kept a few in their shirt pocket the way other men carried mints, and they offered you one in the car with a straight face, knowing full well you were about to make a sound like a cat being bathed. The bag sat near the back of the candy aisle, past the pralines and the divinity and the taffy, and most kids walked right past them. That was fine. Whorehound drops were not for kids. They were for people who remembered a time when candy was not a treat, but a delivery system for something that kept your throat clear and your stomach settled on a long drive through August heat with no air conditioning and the windows down. Number 18. Caramel corn. Stuckey sold it in clear bags tied with a twist, and the pieces stuck together in one solid clump. You did not eat it kernel by kernel. You broke off a chunk like you were cracking toffee and chewed the whole thing at once. The caramel was dark and hard, not the soft, buttery kind. It had been cooked past the point where most people would stop, and it pulled at your fillings with every bite. The bag was always gone before anyone thought to offer it around. Whoever opened it ate it. By the time your father asked if there was any left, you were staring out the window pretending you could not hear him. The empty bag was under the seat. Number 17. Coconut haystacks. Little mounds of shredded coconut held together with chocolate or butterscotch, dropped onto wax paper and left to harden into rough, uneven piles. They looked like something a child had made, and that was part of the charm. Stuckey sold them in boxes near the pecan candy, and they were always the thing your mother picked. Not the fudge, not the brittle, the haystacks. She said they reminded her of the ones her own mother made at Christmas. The coconut was chewy and sweet, and the chocolate on the outside cracked when you bit in. They were never neat. Crumbs fell everywhere, and the chocolate left marks on your fingers that you wiped on the car seat when nobody was looking. Every box looked slightly different because they were dropped by hand, not molded. Number 16. Pulled taffy. Not saltwater taffy. Pulled taffy was a different thing. It came in long, twisted ropes, stretched and folded until it turned opaque and developed that chewy, slightly waxy texture that stuck in your back teeth for an hour. Stuckey's sold it in individual cellophane wrappers, usually in flavors like vanilla, strawberry, and molasses. The molasses ones were dark brown and tasted like something from another century, which they were. Pulled taffy had been a county fair tradition since the 1800s, and roadside stores kept it alive long after most candy companies moved on to cheaper production. It took time and muscle to make properly, and you could taste the difference between handmade and machine-pulled. The Stuckey's version landed somewhere in between, and that was fine with everybody. Number 15. Candied pecans. Stuckey's was a pecan company before it was anything else, and the candied pecans were proof. Whole pecan halves coated in a sugar glaze, roasted until they turned dark amber, and sold in small bags or tins. The coating was crunchy and sweet with a touch of salt that made you eat the whole bag in 10 minutes. Every Stuckey's had a slightly different version. Some were coated in cinnamon sugar. Some had a honey glaze. Some were just butter and brown sugar, cooked until the sugar hardened into a shell around each nut. They were the kind of thing you bought for your aunt as a gift, ate half of on the drive, and then had to stop at another Stuckey's to replace before you arrived. Plain pecans are good. Pecans covered in hot sugar are impossible to stop eating. Number 14. Date nut roll. If you are under 50, you have probably never seen one. A date nut roll was a dense, sticky cylinder of chopped dates and walnuts or pecans, rolled in powdered sugar and sliced into rounds like a log of cookie dough. It sat in the candy case at Stuckey's wrapped in wax paper, and it looked like nothing anyone would pick up on purpose. But the people who knew what it was bought two. The flavor was dark and complex, somewhere between fruitcake and caramel, with the crunch of the nuts breaking through the chewiness of the dates. It was an old confection. Dates were cheap, nuts were local, and sugar was the only other ingredient. A good date nut roll needed nothing else. Stuckey's sold them because they traveled well. They never melted, never crumbled, and never needed refrigeration. For a store that existed because people were driving long distances in hot weather, that mattered. The people who loved them were loyal to the point of obsession. They did not want a substitute, and when the stores started closing, they drove out of their way to find one that still carried them. Some made their own at home, pressing dates and nuts into a log on the kitchen counter, rolling it in sugar, and slicing it thin. It was never quite the same as the one from the glass case, but it was close enough to keep the memory going. Your parents did not plan the stop. There was no map pin, no reservation, no discussion. The blue roof appeared, your father's foot came off the gas, and the car drifted toward the exit ramp. Every family in America had a Stuckey's story because every family in America drove past one. In the 1960s, there were hundreds of them along every major southern highway, and they all looked the same. Same blue roof, same pecan log sign out front, same screen door. That sameness was the point. You knew what you were getting before you walked in, no matter which state you were in. It worked because the candy counter delivered on the same promise every single time. A place to stretch your legs, a cold drink, and a bag of something sweet for the next 100 miles. Number 13. Pecan brittle. Not peanut brittle. Pecan brittle. Stuckey's made the distinction matter because they were a pecan company before they were anything else, and the brittle proved it. The slabs came wrapped in wax paper, thin enough to see through in places, golden brown with whole pecan halves frozen inside like insects in amber. You cracked a piece off and it shattered into splinters that stuck between your teeth for the next 50 miles. The butter in it was real, and you could taste it under the burnt sugar, rich and slightly salty. It was nothing like the peanut brittle you bought at the county fair, which was thick and jaw-breaking and tasted mostly of corn syrup. This was delicate. It broke if you looked at it wrong, and half of it turned to dust in the bag before you got it home. Your mother wrapped it in a dish towel and set it on the dashboard where the sun kept it warm, and by the time you pulled into the driveway, the whole car smelled like a candy kitchen. Nobody makes brittle with that many pecans anymore. The cost alone would price it out of any roadside shop operating on highway margins. Number 12. Peanut patties. bright pink discs of sugar and peanuts wrapped in cellophane, sitting in a box near every register from Florida to Texas. They were hard as a hockey puck and twice as sweet. The pink color came from food dye, and it served no purpose except to make them impossible to ignore. You bit into one, and the sugar shattered around the peanuts, which were roasted and salty enough to make the sweetness bearable. Peanut patties were a Texas and Louisiana specialty that roadside stores adopted because they were cheap to stock and never went stale. They sat in that box for weeks and tasted exactly the same on day 1 and day 30. Road candy was built to survive the glove box, and peanut patties outlasted everything in it. Number 11. Chocolate-covered pecans. Stuckey's dipped whole pecan halves in milk chocolate and sold them in small boxes with a clear window on the lid so you could see exactly what you were getting. The chocolate was thick and sweet, and the pecan inside was roasted and salted. The combination of salt, sweet, crunch, and fat was the reason these boxes rarely made it home as gifts. You opened them in the car, ate 3, offered 1 to your mother, and then finished the rest yourself. Stuckey's was not the only company selling chocolate-covered pecans, but they were the company that put them on a highway where you had nothing else to do for the next 100 miles. Location sold as many boxes as flavor. Number 10. Beef jerky sticks. Slim, dried meat sticks stood upright in a jar near the register, and they were not the teriyaki glazed strips you find in gas stations today. Stuckey's jerky was tough, smoky, and salty enough to make your lips burn. You chewed one piece for miles, working it like leather until the flavor was gone, and then you reached for another. The sticks were a concession to the fact that not everyone walking into a Stuckey's wanted candy. Some people wanted protein, or at least something that felt like it. Truckers bought them by the fistful. Fathers bought one and made it last a whole state. Kids tried one, made a face, and went back to the taffy. The jerky was not sweet, not pretty, and not fun. It was fuel. Number 9. Butter pecan fudge. Stuckey's fudge sat in a glass case, cut into thick slabs and stacked on wax paper. The butter pecan was the one that sold. It was dense, grainy, and loaded with chopped pecans that crunched when you bit through the soft sugar base. Real fudge is not smooth. It has a crumble to it, a texture that comes from cooking the sugar to the right temperature and then beating it as it cools. The Stuckey's version was made in batches, and you could tell which ones had been beaten longer because the color was lighter and the texture was firmer. A slab weighed enough to feel like a real purchase. You carried it out of the store in a small paper bag, and the paper was translucent with butter by the time you got to the car. That grease stain was how you knew it was the real thing. Number 8. Coconut patties. A flat, round disc of sweetened coconut dipped in dark chocolate, wrapped in cellophane, and sold at Stuckey's for decades. Shredded coconut, sugar, and a chocolate coating. Nothing else. But the softness of the coconut against the snap of the chocolate made them disappear from the bag faster than anything else on the shelf. Coconut patties survived Stuckey's. When the stores started closing in the 1980s and 1990s, the candy found its way into gas stations, truck stops, dollar stores, and rest area vending machines across the Southeast. People who had never set foot in a Stuckey's grew up eating them without knowing where they came from. The brand on the wrapper changed, but the candy stayed the same. A few companies in Florida still make them by the thousands, and they turn up in every roadside store between Miami and Memphis. The recipe has not changed because it does not need to. Coconut, sugar, chocolate. What made the Stuckey's version different was the context. You were not buying a coconut patty at the grocery store between the laundry detergent and the bread. You were buying it at a place where candy was the entire reason you stopped. Every purchase in that building felt like a small event, and a treat that cost a few cents felt like a souvenir. The gas stations that sell them today do not understand this. They stack them next to energy drinks and phone chargers, and the candy becomes invisible. At Stuckey's, it was the main attraction. The interstate system did not kill Stuckey's overnight. It was slower than that. The new highways bypassed the old 2-lane roads where the stores had been built, And one by one, the blue roofs disappeared behind overgrown exits that nobody took anymore. The company changed hands, merged, shrank, and tried to rebuild more than once. Some of the stores still exist today, and a few new ones have opened. But the version most people remember, the one with the creaking screen door and the candy case, and the woman who knew the price of everything from memory, that version is gone. What replaced it is cleaner, brighter, and faster. But nobody pulls off the highway for it the way they used to. Speed is not what made those stores worth stopping for. Number 7. Peanut brittle. A flat sheet of caramelized sugar loaded with roasted peanuts, snapped into jagged pieces and sold in a tin or a bag. Stuckey's peanut brittle was hard enough to test a filling and thin enough to shatter if you dropped it. The best pieces had more peanuts than sugar, and you could hold one up to the light and see the nuts pressed flat inside the amber sheet like insects in resin. It was one of the oldest candies in American history, and Stuckey's did not reinvent it. They just sold it in a place where you had 3 hours of empty road ahead of you, and that made it the perfect thing to reach for. Thin, flat, and stackable. You ate a piece, set the bag on the seat, and reached for another one 50 miles later. Number 6. Pecan pie slice. The stores that had a food counter sold pecan pie by the slice, and it was not the syrupy, mass-produced kind. The filling was thick and dark, loaded with whole pecan halves that crunched through the caramelized sugar. The crust was short and buttery and usually a little burnt on the edge, which meant somebody had actually baked it there. A slice of pecan pie at Stuckey's was not a detour from the candy counter. It was the grown-up version of the same idea. Sugar, butter, and pecans assembled in a slightly more respectable format. You sat at the counter, ate it with a fork, drank a cup of coffee, and felt like a reasonable adult for 10 minutes. Then you bought a bag of pralines on the way out and ate them in the car. The pie gave you permission to pretend the stop was practical. The bag in your lap told the truth. Number 5. Pecan Divinity. A white, cloud-shaped mound of whipped sugar, egg whites, and pecans. Divinity looked like meringue and tasted like nothing else. It was sweet without being heavy, and it dissolved on your tongue before you could really chew it. Making it at home was unreliable. Humidity ruined it, overbeating turned it grainy, and underbeating left it flat. The fact that Stuckey sold it in consistent batches meant somebody in the kitchen knew exactly when to stop. Divinity was a Southern specialty that most people under 40 have never tasted because almost nobody makes it commercially anymore. It does not travel well, it does not keep well, and it does not look like something you would pay money for. But if you tasted it once, you never forgot the texture. Nothing in a modern candy aisle comes close. Number 4. Saltwater taffy. Stuckey's sold it in mixed bags, small individually wrapped pieces in wax paper twisted at both ends. The flavors ranged from peppermint to banana to root beer, and the wrappers were color-coded so you could pick through the bag for the ones you wanted. Nobody ate the licorice ones. They sat at the bottom of the bag until your mother threw them away. Saltwater taffy had nothing to do with salt water. The name came from Atlantic City in the 1880s, and it stuck because it sounded better than pulled sugar candy. The Stuckey's version was standard, nothing remarkable about the recipe. What made it work was the volume. A mixed bag had enough variety to keep 3 kids quiet in the back seat for 200 miles, and any candy that buys you 200 miles of silence is worth whatever it costs. Number 3. Ribbon candy. Thin, folded sheets of hard sugar candy in layered colors, pleated like a paper fan and brittle enough to snap if you looked at it wrong. Stuckey's sold ribbon candy in clear boxes, and it was usually the thing people bought as a gift because it looked expensive. The colors, red, green, amber, white, were layered and stretched while the sugar was still hot, then folded into tight accordion shapes and left to cool. Eating it was an exercise in controlled destruction. You broke off a piece along one of the folds and let it dissolve, because biting it sent shards across your tongue like broken glass. Ribbon candy was a holiday tradition in most American households until the 1980s, when it quietly vanished from store shelves. Stuckey's was one of the last places you could find it year-round. Number 2. Pecan pralines. A flat, round disc of brown sugar, butter, cream, and whole pecans cooked in a pot, dropped by the spoonful onto wax paper, and left to set into something between a cookie and a candy. Stuckey's pralines were the real thing, not the boxed and shelf-stabilized version you find in airport gift shops today. The texture was sandy and crumbly, and the brown sugar had a depth that white sugar cannot match. You tasted butter first, then molasses, then the roasted pecan at the center. They broke apart in your hands, and the crumbs were worth licking off your fingers. Pralines are a New Orleans tradition that traveled east along the Gulf Coast and settled into every candy counter from Mobile to Savannah. Stuckey's did not invent them, but Stuckey's put them on a highway where millions of people tasted them for the first time. And for many of those people, that first praline at a roadside store was the reason they kept coming back. Number 1. Pecan log roll. This is the one. The treat that put Stuckey's on the map and kept it there for decades. A roll of nougat center coated in caramel and rolled in chopped pecans, shaped like a short log and wrapped in cellophane. It was sticky, messy, and impossible to eat with any dignity. You held it in one hand and bit off a chunk, and the caramel stretched between your teeth and the roll until it snapped. Pecans fell into your lap. Caramel stuck to the wrapper. Your fingers were coated in a film of sugar and nut dust that nothing short of soap and water could fix, and it was perfect. W.S. Stuckey started selling pecans from a roadside stand in Eastman, Georgia during the Depression, and the pecan log roll became the product that turned a local operation into a chain of hundreds of stores. Everything else on the candy counter existed to keep you browsing until you picked up the log roll. And it worked, because nobody walked past one without at least thinking about it, and most people stopped thinking and started chewing before they reached the door. Lime Rickeys originated in Washington, D.C. during the 1880s and became the sophisticated choice for those who found phosphates too sweet and sodas too ordinary. Named after Democratic lobbyist Colonel Joe Rickey, the original was alcoholic, but soda fountains transformed it into family-friendly refreshment. A proper Lime Rickey started with juice from half a fresh lime squeezed directly into a tall glass, followed by sugar syrup and vigorous soda water. No cream, no ice cream, nothing to mask the sharp brightness of real citrus against cold carbonation. The drink was bracingly tart, almost aggressive in refusing sweetness, finding devoted fans among adults who appreciated its character. During Prohibition, Lime Rickeys became popular as sophisticated, alcohol-free alternatives. Soda fountains served them at political gatherings and afternoon socials, where ladies wanted refreshment without heaviness. The Lime Rickey proved soda fountain drinks could be elegant and restrained. Number 24. Liver and onions. Walk into a roadside diner in 1965, and this was the plate that filled the room with that deep, iron-rich smell. Beef liver, dusted and seasoned, laid across a flat-top griddle next to a heap of onions cooked down until they turned soft and sweet. A few strips of bacon went on top for the regulars who knew to ask. It was cheap protein that stuck to your ribs, the kind of meal a man ordered after a long haul because it felt like real food. Doctors used to push it too, calling it good for the blood. But American tastes turned hard against organ meat as the decades rolled on. Younger eaters wanted a clean burger, not something that reminded them of the slaughterhouse. The griddle stopped getting that order, and the cooks stopped prepping it. Today, most folks under 60 have never tasted it once, and the smell that used to mean dinner is gone from the counter for good. Number 14. Roast turkey dinner with all the trimmings. If there was one meal that proved Howard Johnson's understood its customers better than any other chain in America, it was this plate. A thick slice of roasted turkey breast carved in the back kitchen, laid across the plate with a ladle of hot gravy poured right over the top. Next to it, a scoop of sage stuffing, a mound of mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and a dinner roll still warm from the oven. This was Thanksgiving dinner on a Tuesday night in April, and that was the entire point. Millions of Americans traveling the highway ate alone or with a carload of tired children, hundreds of miles from anyone who would have cooked them a proper dinner. The roast turkey plate was not food. It was the feeling of sitting down somewhere that somebody had gone to the trouble. Howard Johnson's prepared the turkey in large batches, roasting whole birds every morning and slicing breast meat throughout the day. By the dinner service, the slices were always drier than the ones carved at lunch, and regulars knew to arrive early. But even the late afternoon turkey was better than anything at the vending machines in the new interstate rest stops. A plate of turkey and cranberry sauce at a Howard Johnson's in 1962 was a promise that the road had not taken everything away. You could still sit in a clean booth with a real fork and a cloth napkin and eat a meal your mother would have recognized. That is not a small thing when you are 600 miles from home. Nobody carves whole turkeys for highway travelers anymore. Not because the recipe was difficult, but because the idea stopped making financial sense sometime around 1978, and nothing replaced it. Chocolate soldiers marched onto soda fountain menus during World War I as patriotic treats honoring American troops overseas. These elaborate drinks were built tall and proud, with layers of chocolate syrup, chocolate ice cream, and chocolate malt powder, creating a tower of cocoa intensity standing at attention in the glass. Whipped cream formed the soldier's white helmet on top, sometimes decorated with a small American flag or red cherry representing a service ribbon. Presentation was as important as flavor. Soda jerks constructed each chocolate soldier with military precision, ensuring straight sides and proper proportions. During both World Wars, fountains offered them at special prices for uniformed service members, and families purchased them honoring sons overseas. The chocolate intensity was overwhelming, designed for serious chocolate lovers. Children saved allowances for weeks to afford one. After wartime fervor faded and soda fountains began closing, chocolate soldiers lost cultural context and disappeared. Number 14. The automat hot plate. This was a whole way of eating that has now completely vanished, and the numbers behind it are worth sitting with. The automat let you skip the counter entirely. You walked up to a wall of little glass-doored compartments, dropped your nickels into a slot, turned a chrome knob, and the door popped open with a hot plate of food waiting behind it. Macaroni and cheese, baked beans, chicken pot pie, a slab of meatloaf, all served by a wall instead of a waitress. Horn and Hardart ran the most famous of these, and at their peak in the late 1950s and early 1960s, they operated more than 165 locations across New York and Philadelphia. For a long stretch, a cup of their coffee cost exactly 1 nickel, poured from a brass dolphin head spout, and it stayed 5 cents until 1950, when they finally bumped it to 2 nickels. At their height, they were feeding hundreds of thousands of people a day, the largest restaurant operation in the world. The food behind those glass doors was real cooking too, made fresh in a commissary and trucked in, not the frozen stuff that came later. Then the fast food chains arrived with their drive-up windows and paper bags, and the whole idea of dropping coins into a wall started to feel like the past. Location after location went dark through the 1960s and 1970s. By the time the very last Horn and Hardart automat closed its doors in 1991, the format had been dead in spirit for years. A generation grew up never knowing you could feed a family from a wall of little windows, never hearing the clink of the nickels or the click of the chrome knob. The whole strange, wonderful machine vanished, and the hot plate behind the glass went with it. Number 18. Baked Virginia Ham Dinner. A thick slab of baked ham with a glaze made from brown sugar, dry mustard, and pineapple juice, served with scalloped potatoes and a side of green peas. This was the Sunday dinner plate at Howard Johnson's, the meal families ordered when they wanted something that felt like home, but did not want to cook it themselves. The ham came pre-sliced in the kitchen, thick enough that you could see the smoke ring at the edge, and the glaze had a sweetness that lingered on your lips. Howard Johnson's sourced their hams from Virginia suppliers for decades, and the quality held steady enough that regular travelers knew exactly what to expect before the plate arrived. It tasted better on the road than it ever did at home, because the road was the only place you let somebody else carve the ham for you. Hobokens were an unlikely marriage of pineapple soda and chocolate ice cream that became one of the most beloved regional specialties in New Jersey soda fountain history. Named after the working-class city across the Hudson from Manhattan, This drink celebrated unexpected pleasures from experimenting behind the counter. The combination sounded wrong, tropical fruit against rich chocolate, but flavors created something entirely new. Pineapple's bright acidity cut through chocolate's heaviness while chocolate rounded pineapple's sharp edges. Soda jerks in Hoboken served these throughout the 1920s and 1930s, with each fountain developing variations. Some added vanilla syrup, others swirled chocolate around the glass before adding soda and ice cream. The Hoboken became local pride, something visitors from New York had to try when crossing the river. As New Jersey's industrial cities declined and soda fountains closed their marble counters, the Hoboken vanished along with the neighborhoods that created it. Number 15. Ambrosia Salad. This was the Sunday favorite no chain ever bothered to copy. It came together cold in a big bowl, mandarin oranges and pineapple and shredded coconut folded into sweetened whipped cream, with marshmallows tossed in once the factories started making them cheap in the 1950s. Some cooks added a handful of pecans or a few maraschino cherries for color. It rode the line between salad and dessert and never picked a side, which was exactly the charm. Diners ladled it out alongside the meat and three on weekends, a soft, sweet, cloud-like scoop that felt like a treat without costing the kitchen much. It tasted like church potlucks and family reunions and a slower kind of Sunday. But it was fussy to keep fresh and entirely homemade, and no national chain ever saw the point of putting it through a commissary. So while burgers and fries got mass-produced and shipped everywhere, ambrosia stayed a local hand-mixed thing. When those independent counters closed, it simply left with them. Number 16. Turkey croquettes with mushroom sauce. These were the Monday special at most Howard Johnson's locations, and they existed for one reason: leftover turkey. Ground turkey mixed with celery, onion, and a thick bechamel, shaped into cylinders, breaded, and deep-fried until the outside turned dark and crunchy. They came two to a plate, sitting in a pool of mushroom cream sauce with mashed potatoes on the side. The croquette was already an old-fashioned dish by the 1960s, and Howard Johnson's was one of the last chains still serving them. There was something almost Victorian about the whole effort. This careful work of turning yesterday's leftovers into something that looked like today's meal. Most people who ate turkey croquettes at Howard Johnson's never knew they were eating reheated turkey, and that was exactly the point. In 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act and changed the way America ate. The new interstate highways were faster, wider, and designed to bypass every small town and roadside business that had grown up along the old two-lane routes. Howard Johnson's had built its empire along those older highways, where travelers had no choice but to stop. The interstates gave them a choice, and the choice was speed. Rest stops replaced restaurants. Vending machines replaced waitresses. A generation of meals that had been cooked in real kitchens and served on real plates gave way to food wrapped in paper and eaten with one hand on the steering wheel. Nobody voted to end the Howard Johnson's way of eating. The highway just made it irrelevant, and the meals that lived inside those orange-roofed buildings had no way to follow the traffic to the new road. Cherry Smashes represented the theatrical peak of soda fountain craftsmanship, requiring more showmanship than any other drink. Unlike simple cherry sodas made with artificial syrup, a proper smash used fresh cherries dramatically muddled right in front of customers. The soda jerk placed ripe cherries in a heavy glass, added sugar, then crushed them with a wooden muddler until juice ran red and fragrant. Shaved ice was packed on top, followed by cherry syrup and soda water that turned everything into a bubbling, fruit-studded masterpiece. The result tasted like concentrated summer, fresh cherry intensity that no bottled syrup matched, with pulp adding texture to every sip. Cherry Smashes were seasonal specials, appearing when local cherries came into season and disappearing with harvest. Children pressed faces against fountain counters watching soda jerks perform the ritual. Modern convenience killed the cherry smash because muddling takes time, skill, and fruit that cannot ship year-round. Number 17. Grasshopper Pie. If the dessert case had a slice of something pale mint green behind the glass, this was it. It borrowed everything from the grasshopper cocktail that swept through after the war, white crème de cacao and crème de menthe whipped into cream and set into a chocolate cookie crust. The color alone sold it, that soft green nobody else on the menu could match. It was cool and minty and a little grown up, the dessert you ordered to feel fancy at the end of a roadside meal. Diners loved it because it took no baking, just chilling, so a busy kitchen could keep slices ready in the cooler all day. For a stretch in the 1960s, it was everywhere. The height of dinner party sophistication served right off the highway. But the mint and chocolate fad cooled, and the boozy, retro look started to seem dated. Newer desserts crowded it out of the case. Today, that distinctive green slice is almost impossible to find, gone with the era that thought it was the last word in elegance. Number 22, chopped sirloin steak dinner. This was a hamburger that refused to call itself one. A thick oval patty of ground sirloin, seasoned and broiled, served on a hot plate with a baked potato and a side of green beans. No bun, no ketchup, no pickles. The whole presentation said this was a proper dinner, not a sandwich you ate with your hands. Howard Johnson's charged a premium for it compared to the regular hamburger, and travelers who wanted something that felt like a proper sit-down steak dinner without the price or the long wait ordered it by the thousands every single week across the chain. The chopped sirloin vanished from most roadside menus by the early 1980s, replaced by cheaper preformed patties that nobody pretended were anything other than what they were. There was a time when you could drive from Maine to Florida and never once eat somewhere unfamiliar. The orange roof of a Howard Johnson's was a contract with the American driver. It said the food would taste exactly the same in Connecticut as it did in Virginia. The menu would be identical. The booths would be the same turquoise vinyl. The ice cream would come in the same 28 flavors. Howard Deering Johnson built his empire on one idea: that a family 300 miles from home should never have to wonder what they were about to eat. That was the promise. And for 30 years, it held. What most people never think about is what happened to the meals when the promise broke. They did not go to other restaurants. They did not get passed down or written into cookbooks. They simply stopped existing because the only place they ever lived was under that orange roof. Egg creams carried one of the most misleading names in culinary history because they contained neither eggs nor cream. Yet this Brooklyn-born classic defined New York City soda fountain culture for generations. Created in Jewish immigrant neighborhoods during the late 1800s, egg creams combined just 3 ingredients: milk, chocolate syrup, and seltzer water. The magic happened in technique. Soda jerks poured cold milk into a tall glass, added Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup, then blasted the mixture with high-pressure seltzer until a thick, foamy white head rose. That foam was the signature. Creamy, frothy, impossibly light without actual cream. The drink had to be consumed immediately while foam held, making egg creams impossible to bottle. Every candy store in Brooklyn served them for a dime, and arguments about which corner made the best egg cream divided neighborhoods. When corner stores closed, the egg cream nearly vanished with them. Number 18, creamed chipped beef on toast. Servicemen had a saltier name for it, but on the menu it read plain and honest. Thin slices of dried salted beef got stirred into a roux of butter, flour, and milk, then spooned thick over toast with a little cayenne for bite. It started as depression food, the kind of meal you made when the pantry was nearly bare, and it became a fixture in military mess halls during the war. Soldiers came home with a taste for it, and diners were happy to serve it cheap for the breakfast crowd. For a couple of decades, it was a working man's morning plate, filling and salty and warm. But it never escaped its reputation. As chain restaurants spread and breakfast got built around eggs and pancakes, the creamed beef started to feel like leftover army food nobody missed. The counters dropped it one by one. A handful of old-school spots still make it, but for most Americans, it vanished off the breakfast board decades ago. Number 21, deviled crab, a mixture of crab meat, breadcrumbs, egg, Worcestershire sauce, and a sharp hit of dry mustard, packed into a real crab shell and baked until the top browned and cracked. Howard Johnson served this as both an appetizer and a main course depending on the location, and on the coast, you got 2 shells on the plate instead of 1. The seasoning was aggressive for its era. Most chain restaurants in the 1960s played it safe with their seafood, keeping everything mild and buttered so nobody would send it back. But the deviled crab had enough mustard and ground pepper to remind you that somebody in that kitchen actually wanted you to taste something. It was one of the first dishes cut when the chain simplified its menu in the late 1970s because crab was expensive, and nobody was making the drive to Howard Johnson's specifically to eat it. Broadway sodas paired chocolate soda with coffee ice cream, creating a sophisticated combination that adults loved while children turned up their noses. This drink earned its name from New York's theater district, where late-night patrons sought refreshment after shows. The combination seemed strange, chocolate and coffee competing, but flavors complemented beautifully. Chocolate syrup provided sweetness and depth, while coffee ice cream added bitter complexity and gentle caffeine, helping theatergoers stay awake on subway rides home. Soda Jerks built Broadway sodas with extra care, knowing customers were sophisticated New Yorkers who noticed wrong proportions. The drink appeared throughout Manhattan during the 1930s and 1940s, becoming associated with Broadway glamour, a little decadent, entirely New York. When coffee ice cream became harder to find and soda fountains began closing, Broadway sodas faded from menus. Today, few remember this elegant combination that once defined sophisticated soda fountain culture. Number 21. Salisbury steak. Here was a way to make ground beef feel like an occasion. The patty was seasoned, shaped oval so nobody mistook it for a hamburger, then smothered in brown gravy with onions and set beside a pile of mashed potatoes. It dated all the way back to a Civil War-era doctor named James Salisbury, who pushed ground beef as a cure for soldiers' stomach troubles. Diners adopted it in the mid-century because it was cheap, fast, and felt one step nicer than a plain burger patty. For a working family, it was a dignified dinner that did not break the bank. But the same dish that made diners proud got picked up by the frozen TV dinner companies, and suddenly Salisbury steak meant a sectioned aluminum tray heated in the oven. The name started to sound institutional, like cafeteria food or hospital food. Diners quietly let it slide off the menu rather than compete with the freezer aisle. Today it survives mostly as a punchline about old TV dinners. Number 17. Fried clam strips plate. This was not just a menu item. This was the reason Howard Johnson's existed. In 1925, Howard Deering Johnson borrowed money to buy a small patent medicine store in Quincy, Massachusetts, and started selling ice cream from a soda fountain. The ice cream brought people through the door, but it was the fried clams that turned a soda counter into an empire. By the late 1930s, Johnson had figured out how to buy clams in massive quantities from the beds off the coast of Ipswich, Massachusetts, and fry them in a proprietary batter that stayed crispy even after sitting on the plate for 10 minutes. Every single Howard Johnson's restaurant in the country served the exact same fried clam strips, from the same recipe out of the same centralized kitchen operation. The clams were tender inside and shattering crisp outside, piled high on a paper-lined plate with French fries, coleslaw, and a cup of tartar sauce. For millions of Americans, this plate was the taste of summer vacation. You ate it in a turquoise booth with your family still sunburned from the beach, and the grease on your fingers was part of the memory. Families drove 50 miles out of their way for it. There are letters in old newspaper archives from travelers who planned their entire road trips around Howard Johnson's clam strip stops. When the chain started cutting costs in the 1970s, they switched from Ipswich belly clams to cheaper Pacific clam strips, and the regulars noticed on the first bite. The new clams were rubbery and bland, and no amount of batter could hide it. There was no announcement, no apology, just a different clam on the plate and a loyalty that cracked right down the middle. The fried clam strip plate was on the menu for over 80 years. When the last Howard Johnson's in Lake George, New York finally closed, it had nowhere left to go. Nectar sodas were the drink that made every other fruit soda seem like an imposter, combining multiple fruit flavors into something greater than any single ingredient. These elaborate concoctions layered cherry, orange, lemon, and sometimes pineapple syrups with vanilla undertones, creating a flavor profile so complex that customers debated exactly what they were tasting. Soda Jerks guarded nectar recipes jealously, each fountain developing its own signature blend that regulars could identify blindfolded. The drink arrived in tall glasses with colors shifting from deep red through orange and gold, looking like sunset captured in soda water. Children saved nectar sodas for special occasions because multiple syrups cost more than single-flavored drinks. Adults appreciated sophistication of flavors that evolved with every sip. The name promised something divine, and the best delivered. When pre-mixed fountain syrups replaced individual flavor bottles, nectar sodas lost their magic and quietly disappeared. Number 22, macaroni and stewed tomatoes. This is the one that disappeared the day the interstate bypassed Main Street. It was about as plain as a blue plate special ever got, just boiled macaroni stirred into canned tomatoes, maybe a knob of butter and a little sugar to round it out. It came up through the Depression because it cost almost nothing, and small-town diners kept ladling it out for decades because regulars asked for it by name. It was a dish for the kind of place where the cook knew your order before you sat down. Then the new highway came through, and the cars stopped pulling off at the old downtown stretch. The travelers who would have wandered in for a cheap plate now blew past on the bypass toward the chains near the on-ramp. Those little counters could not survive on locals alone, and one by one, they shuttered. The macaroni went dark with them, a humble plate that needed a slow road and a steady door to stay alive. You will not find it on a menu now. Number 19, breaded veal cutlet. A thin piece of veal, pounded flat, dredged in egg and seasoned breadcrumbs, and pan-fried until the coating turned deep gold. Howard Johnson's served it with a side of spaghetti and red sauce and a warm dinner roll, which made the whole plate feel more like a neighborhood Italian restaurant than a highway chain. Veal was still affordable in the 1950s and 1960s, and a breaded cutlet was one of the few dishes on the menu that felt like somebody's mother had actually cooked it. By the mid-1970s, veal prices climbed and the chain quietly swapped in a breaded pork cutlet that looked similar on the plate but did not taste like anything worth remembering. Most customers never said a word about the switch. They just stopped ordering it. Black and white sodas earned their name from the dramatic visual contrast of dark chocolate syrup swirling through vanilla ice cream and clear soda water. This wasn't a simple float. It was carefully constructed to showcase the soda jerk's skill in layering flavors without letting them combine. The glass started with chocolate syrup coating the bottom, followed by premium vanilla ice cream dropped precisely into the center. Soda water was added slowly down a long spoon to prevent the ice cream from overturning, creating ribbons of chocolate winding through white foam like marble veining. Customers used long-handled spoons to chase bites of ice cream with chocolatey soda, each mouthful different from the last. Black and white sodas appeared across America from the 1920s through the 1960s, popular in New York drugstores and Midwestern ice cream parlors. The drink required quality ice cream and thick chocolate syrup. As soda fountains gave way to fast food chains, this craftsmanship became economically impossible. Number 25, chicken a la king. There was a time you could not sit down at a diner counter without seeing this one chalked on the board. It was chicken and mushrooms folded into a warm white sauce, ladled over toast points until the bread went soft underneath. Cooks built it from whatever the breakfast rush left behind. A little pimento for color, a splash of sherry if the owner was feeling generous. It walked a strange line, fancy enough for a society banquet, cheap enough for a trucker on a budget. They even served it at President Nixon's birthday spread, which tells you how far it had traveled. But by the late 1960s, the shine was already coming off. Frozen versions hit grocery freezers, and the homemade kind started to feel like something your aunt made, not something worth ordering out. The diners that kept it going did so out of habit more than demand. Now, you would be hard-pressed to find a single counter in America still spooning it over toast. Number 20, Friday fish fry platter. Every Friday, Howard Johnson's locations from the Midwest to the Eastern Seaboard ran a fish fry special that packed the dining room from 5 o'clock onward. A generous portion of battered haddock or cod, deep-fried until the coating shattered when your fork touched it, served with tartar sauce, lemon, a mound of French fries, and coleslaw. In Catholic towns across Pennsylvania, New York, and New England, this was the Friday meal, and there was no discussion about where to go. Whole families drove to Howard Johnson's on Friday the way they drove to church on Sunday, out of habit, and because the fish was consistently good. The platter was big enough to split between two children, and most parents did exactly that. When the chain shrank its portions in the 1970s and the fish got thinner while the batter got thicker, families stopped coming on Fridays first. That was the warning sign. When Friday went quiet, the rest of the week followed. Dusty Miller's took malted milk to its logical extreme by adding so much malt powder that the drink arrived looking rolled in flour. The name came from powdery white malt dust coating the rim and floating on the creamy surface, a badge proving the soda jerk hadn't skimped on expensive ingredients. While ordinary malteds used a single scoop of malt powder, Dusty Miller's doubled or tripled that amount until the drink became thick, grainy, and intensely flavored. The malt taste dominated, that distinctive, almost biscuity sweetness that commercial malteds barely hint at today. Midwest soda fountains particularly embraced Dusty Miller's, where malt appreciation ran deep and customers demanded real substance. Teenage boys ordered them believing extra malt built muscle. The drinks were so thick they required 2 hands to lift and a spoon to eat the bottom sludge. Dusty Miller's required fresh malt stored airtight, careful mixing to prevent lumps, and customers willing to pay premium prices. Number 20. Welsh Rarebit. Do not let the fancy name fool you, because this was working-class comfort poured over toast. A sharp cheddar sauce, loosened with ale or beer, sharpened with mustard and a few spices, ladled hot over a slice of toasted bread until it ran down the sides of the plate. American taverns and lunch counters served it from the late 1800s clear into the middle of the next century, a quick, warm meal that filled you up without much meat. It had a little theater to it, too, the cheese sauce gleaming, the toast going soft underneath. For a long stretch, it was the thing you ordered when you wanted something hot and cheesy, but did not want a full dinner. Then the grilled cheese sandwich came along and did roughly the same job for less fuss. Why ladle sauce when you could press 2 slices of bread around a slab of cheese on the griddle? The Rarebit lost the argument. It faded from the counters and took its odd, comforting name with it, leaving most diners today with no idea it ever existed. Number 15. Broiled Boston Scrod. A young cod or haddock fillet, split and broiled with butter and a light dusting of paprika, served on a hot oval plate with lemon, boiled potatoes, and a small dish of drawn butter. The word scrod confused half the customers who ordered it. It was not a species. It was a size, a young and small cod, tender enough to fall apart if you looked at it wrong. Howard Johnson's served it with a side of their brown bread, and in the coastal towns north of Boston, this was what the locals ordered instead of the clam strips. The tourists ate clams. The regulars ate scrod. When the chain began sourcing cheaper fish from overseas and dropped the Boston designation, the scrod plate lost the only thing that had made it special. Phosphates were the original soda fountain sensation that launched an entire industry before Coca-Cola existed. These effervescent drinks combined carbonated water with flavored syrups and acid phosphate, a tangy, mineral-rich solution that gave each sip a distinctive crisp bite unlike anything served today. Soda jerks pumped syrup from ornate dispensers, added acid phosphate, then topped with fizzing soda water drawn from elaborate brass fountains. The result was refreshingly tart without being sour, with a clean finish that brought customers back daily. Every drugstore and corner pharmacy from the 1870s through the 1920s featured phosphates, with flavors ranging from cherry and lemon to exotic violet and wild orange. A phosphate cost 5 cents and provided refreshment plus mild medicinal benefit. Phosphoric acid was believed to aid digestion. Young couples courted over phosphate glasses, businessmen closed deals at soda counters, and children saved pennies for weekend treats. Sweeter sodas eventually pushed phosphates into obscurity. Number 13. The Lime Ricky. Before soda came out of a gun in a can, the diner soda fountain mixed your drink to order, and the Lime Ricky was one of the best of them. The counterman squeezed fresh lime, added a shot of syrup, and topped it with seltzer pulled straight from the tap until it fizzed up cold and tart. The bite of the lime cut clean through the sugar, so it never tasted cloying the way a bottled pop did. It went back to the 1880s as a grown-up drink in Washington, but by the diner age it had become the thing kids ordered after school and adults ordered when they wanted something sharp on a hot day. The soda jerk who could build one fast and fizzy was a small-town legend. But the hand-mixed fountain drink was a casualty of the bottle and the can. Once soda came pre-made and ice-cold from a cooler, nobody wanted to pay a man to squeeze a lime. The fountains were ripped out, the syrups packed away, and the Ricky faded into a memory of a counter that no longer exists. Blue Roof is mostly gone now. A few of them still stand along highways in the South, and a few new ones have opened. But the version I remember, the one with the candy case and the screen door and the woman who weighed your bag on a hanging scale, that version belonged to a kind of road that does not exist anymore. If you ever walked through one of those doors, find a treat from this list. Track down the closest version you can and eat it the way you used to. In the car, windows down. And if this brought back something good, hit subscribe and share this video with someone who remembers that Blue Roof the same way you do.